Hi, welcome back. So I've taken the liberty of rendering out a few shots of our curtains here, quick turntable, so we could see how they looked, and I think they look pretty good. There were a couple of changes that I made off camera that I just want to run through with you really quickly, and mainly it was very small details. Like up here, this is flat, and that is good, but in our shot, if we go back to the original Marvelous Designer, I can see here that this is kind of peaked up a little bit, and it's still a little bunched together. Now, it might seem like a very small detail, but depending on which angle you catch the render from, you can see this kind of peak here, and it just doesn't look that good. So I fixed this simply by selecting both these 2D shapes that we used for the elastic to draw the curtains together. And what I forgot actually in the last part was to turn it off, because now we've drawn this cloth together, we don't need that elastic anymore. So if we turn it off, it'll allow the top here to relax slightly and give us a more natural look. So if I just turn these off, freeze, so unfreeze them, and hit render, you'll see this top edge start to relax a bit. Okay, that hits flat down on our avatar object here. So you're going to get a much better look. I mean, it is quite a small thing, but you know, every little bit helps to add to that overall realistic look. The other thing I did was, as I intend to use this in the end as a very delicate material, sort of a net curtain like material, I actually decreased the particle distance down to about 15. Just made it that little bit smoother. And in fact, if we look here, I mean, this is pretty smooth. So, you know, I wanted this to be a very, very delicate, very smooth material. So I did decrease that particle density a little bit. Now I think it looks great. Alright, let's jump back into Maya, and we're going to be making the curtains for this back window. Now I've taken the liberty of just hiding the bed here so we can get a better look at it. I've also put in this object here, which I'm going to use as a measuring stick within Marvelous Designer. So basically it's just a box that's the width of this window. I'm going to use this to judge how wide my cloth should be, and it'll also tell me where the floor plane is. So if I jump into Marvelous Designer now, you'll see that I've just exported that from Maya as an OBJ and imported it into Marvelous Designer here. And if we take a look at the curtains we're going to be making, you see there's a fair number of different elements here. There's these two back curtains in blue, and then there's this white sort of quite complicated curtain arrangement at the front. There's also just a little thing that comes down here. So we'll create the back curtains first, and this is actually quite simple for the back curtains. Now we need something to hang the curtains off of, and I don't want to use this geometry. So what I'm going to do is use a frozen piece of cloth. So let's just come in here and create something about that big. Okay, because my curtain is going to be about half the width of the window, and when I stitch it to this, it will pull across this way. In fact, it's probably easier just to show you. So let's put this here and move it into position, and I'll change the gizmo to local screen coordinate. Okay, and let's get it, you know, about there. We don't need it to interact with this object, we're just using this purely as a measure. And then I'll create another piece of fabric that's the length of the floor plus a little bit, and about just slightly over half the width of the window. Because if you think about it, when you draw these curtains together, you'd actually want them to close in the middle. So just slightly longer than half the width of the window. I'm then going to move this back curtain into position here. Pull it up a little bit. Anything in Marvelous Designer that starts a simulation sort of halfway through the floor, like this, so if I just simulate now, will be immediately cut off. And by immediately, I mean by the time it's worked out its first simulation frame. And this is taking a lot longer than it normally does, simply because it's deciding where to cut this cloth off. Okay, so I just paused that a little while. As you can see, anything below the invisible foreplane was just disregarded, and not only that, it took bloody ages to simulate it. So bisecting the ground plane on Marvelous Designer, not always a great idea. So we're going to pull that a little bit higher than this thing. I'm also going to angle it forwards a little bit. This will help when it drapes backwards. Okay, I'm then going to grab it in this viewport, just move it down, which won't change its position here, and I'm just going to stitch this to this. Okay, and before I simulate out, I need to freeze this piece, otherwise they'll both just plummet to the floor. So while this is frozen, it will stay where it is, but I can still sew other objects to it, which makes it quite a useful thing. I'm also going to add in a fabric here, just a cotton. Okay, so just call that cotton. And I'm going to make it a slightly different color, just helps me visualize when I've actually assigned it to something. So let's make it a green. There we go. And now simulate. You could drop the particle distance up to 40, which would make the simulation faster, but for something like this it's really not going to take that long, so I like to just leave it at the default, which in Marvelous Designer 3 is 20. And as you can see, that really doesn't take long to drape down there. So, and you know, compared to doing this in some of the other cloth simulators I've used, things like N-cloth with this much resolution would take a lot longer, so I kind of like to use this system. It's really quick for ArcViz. And just let that settle out a bit. And you can still grab it and kind of move it around. You know, make sure you've got it in the position you want it. Maybe you are not happy with this and you want to tug it out a bit. And you know, I really quite like this feature that makes it so interactive. Let's grab this and pull it back here. And pull this in a bit. And you know, you could spend a while doing this, getting the bottom shape exactly how you like it. But you know, I don't want you guys to have to watch me do this for the next 5 minutes until I'm perfectly happy, so I'm just going to stop that simulation. I'll actually freeze this piece of cloth, and then I'm going to take both of these objects. Let's go up to the scene, select both of these patterns, and Control C and Control V. And then I'm going to plonk them on the other, so I can make the other half of the curtain. Now unfreeze this. It came in frozen because the one we copied was frozen, and then reset its pattern. So we'll just grab this and this, easier to do in this view, and we'll just move them over to here. Okay, let's make sure they're parallel. They are. And now just grab this one and push it over here. Move it up a bit so it's not bisecting that floor plane, and tilt it forwards a bit so we get a nice drape. Okay, now simulate. And of course, this one being frozen, it will just stay where it is. Aha, I can see there. I forgot to freeze this top one, so it's just plummeting towards the ground. Not to worry, we can just reset our pattern and set this onto freeze. There we go. Okay, I'll just pause while this drapes out. Okay, so that's just finished draping out. Looks pretty nice. It's smooth enough for me, especially on these back curtains that are going to be mostly hidden. If you wanted to get it, you know, massively smooth, you can drop this particle distance down to maybe 15. But as I've said before, the lower this, the more geometry you're going to get spat out at the end. So something to bear in mind if you're not doing a real close-up shot, or you're using a textured fabric, especially because, you know, unless you're doing kind of a sheer glossy fabric that's going to really show every sort of pinch and wrinkle, then texture on these curtains, you could probably get away with even a higher particle density. So just bear in mind, I normally try and simulate out for the shot I need, and then I'll save these garment files, and if I need to open them up again and make them higher quality, I can just come in and drop this down. Alright, so if we look at our shot here, we've got our back curtains now. Let's get on with making this a little bit more complicated arrangement here. So to do this, I'm going to use one long frozen piece that I can attach it to. So let's just draw that up about the width of the window. There we go. And we'll get it into position. Okay, and I want to pull it a bit far away from these back curtains. I can push it back later when I bring it into Maya, but for right now I don't want too much interaction between the front and the back, and let's just freeze that one so it doesn't simulate. Okay, and now I need a length of cloth that I can basically drag upwards like so. So let's create that. So I'm just going to make it the same width as this, and I'm just going to pull it down. It's about there. That seems about long enough to be to make a nice bunching, and then we'll move that into position here. Okay, we don't have to be too accurate because the stitching will pull it together, but again, you don't want it too far away either. And I'm going to move this out of the way so I can take a look at it. And basically what I want to do is draw some lines in the center and the sides so I can use the elastic properties of those lines to pull this curtain upwards. So let's go to our internal polygonal line, and let's just create 3 in the center here. Now I'm using 3 simply because I want a lot of elasticity, and I find if you use more than 1 it just gives you a nicer kind of pull to it. So I'm just clicking and then I'm holding shift to get a straight line, and then I'm double clicking where I want to finish this line. Okay, and 1 more. So here, got here, shift, double click. Alright, and we want to put a couple in for each edge here. So shift, double click, and 1 for here. And just again with the other side, as you probably expected. Now with all this elasticity going on, I'm actually going to make sure to simulate this out at 40 because it will be a bit slow at 20. You know, I'm going to drop it down a tad later so I get a smoother cloth, and I'll just need to sew that to this. Let's just make sure the stitching took. Yes, it did. I can see it there. Okay, and now I need to grab all these 2D shapes, which are all these internal lines here. I need to turn the elastic on, and at first I'm going to go with a ratio of 50, but I'll leave the strength at 1, and we'll see what we get from this. Let's just make sure we've got the settings here. Yep, and I'm going to put the cotton fabric on it. Okay, and let's hit go. Whoops, and we've made a very sort of elementary mistake. We forgot to freeze this, so let's just come in and quickly resolve that. There we go, and you can see this start to bunch up now. Okay, so that's kind of bunching up, but it's not there yet. Obviously we're going to need to keep adding some strength to these elasticity lines. Now the reason I don't just do that all in one go is because we need to get this, you know, very tightly pulled together, and I find if you do it all in one go it can be a bit of a shock to the system on this thing, a bit like when we did the curtains on the bed. So, you know, sometimes it's better to just inch it across a little bit at a time. So let's first of all increase the ratio to 50. Okay, hang on a second, let's make sure we're in the right place here. Yeah, so let's go to 45, and you should see that pull up a bit more. There we go. And now we can start dialing the strength up a bit. Let it settle. Okay. Alright, so we're going to go to ratio. Let's go to 40. 30. Oi, that was pretty good, but we're going to have to go even lower. So let's try 25. 20. 15. And maybe even as low as 10. Okay, so that's got our basic middle drapery there. Now I'm going to increase or decrease the particles. So let's maybe put the strength of this down to 10 to give it a bit more pliability. And let's take this and put this to 20. and just leave it to simulate for a little minute. Okay, you'll see it start to drop a bit. Alright, and I think the ratio on the side pieces could actually be lowered. So let's find out which ones those are. It's that one and that one. And let's put the ratio of these to 20. And that one and that one. 20. Let's give these a little bit more hang. Okay, let's keep the middle as bunched up tightly, and let's just give the outsides just a little bit more play. Maybe even as much as 25. Let's grab all of them together. Okay, should be that one. Yeah. Nope. Hang on, I'm going to just stop the simulation while I figure out which lines we need. This one, this one, this one, and then this one. Okay. So let's make this 25 with a strength of, say, 8. And again, this is entirely personal preference. It's how you want this to hang. You know, I prefer it a little looser on the outside, a little more bunched up in the middle. Okay, might even take it just that little bit further. So really kind of loosen up these edges while keeping that middle really tight. Okay, and just give that a second or two to settle down. Alright, I'm going to just stop it there because I don't, as I said, want you guys to just watch the simulation forever. So freeze this, because we're done with this middle piece now. We'll put a nice bit of fabric over there in a minute, but for right now this is fine. And what we want to do is drape some curtains off here. So we're going to need something that's this wide, because this is actually this wide. It's just bunched up. So let's take something that's that wide, like so, and make it a sort of length where it might just hit the floor, about there, I would say. So we'll move it into position. Let's get it sort of parallel with this piece here. And as I say, you don't need to be too accurate, but you don't want to be miles away. And let's take this and sew it to this. Okay. So make sure we've frozen this and we've frozen the back ones. And now let's just hit go. And what we're looking for is this to drape down and just about hit the floor. Maybe even hit the floor, depending on the look you're going for. So we should just about, no, we're actually going to miss the floor. And I actually wanted to hit it, so let's grab this and just make it a bit longer still, I think. There we go. I reckon that's going to just clip the floor now, which should be just perfect. So let's reset the pattern and hit go again. I'll just pause while this kind of simulates downwards. Okay, so that's had a chance to kind of settle down. It swung a little bit first, and now it's all nice and settled. So what I forgot to do is put my cotton material on it, but that's not such a problem. I can just do that now. There we go. And I'll probably simulate out a few frames just to let that cotton material kind of smooth it out a bit. Put a few more wrinkles in there. And then I'm just going to copy this over and stitch it to the other side. So let's just stop that simulation. So let's just Control C and Control V this one. Let's put it over here. Let's freeze this one. Reset the pattern on this one. And bring it into position exactly the same as we did on the other side. Nothing too complicated. And stitch it together. And just let it once again simulate out. Okay, so this one is now simulated out, and I'm quite happy with that. You know, as I said before, you can use the interactivity of Marvelous Designer to kind of push and pull it about until you're absolutely set, but that looks pretty fine to me. Okay, so what I want to do just to finish this off is just to make a little hanging thing for here. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to start with just a square here. I'm going to make it, you know, large enough to cover up this sort of mess here where we've elasticated it all upwards. So let's grab this and see how big it actually is in comparison to the elastic bunch there. I'll just push F to focus in on the piece I'm working with. Okay, so it's maybe a bit wide. Let's just pull it in. Yeah, a little bit wide. So let's just come up here and use the transform to make it a little bit narrower. Okay, so that's about perfect for me. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use this, which will place a point along the line. Just going to pull in a point there, and now I can pull it upwards. So use this, and actually that's putting a curve in. Don't want that. I'll just undo that, and I need to select this here. Actually, what we've got here is not good. I've put 2 points in by accident, and it's because I can't really see with this on top of everything else. So let's just come in and move this up. So I need to select this point and just move it up. Okay, now if I want to get a bit flasher, I can take this and sort of start to curve it a bit. Okay, and this one too. So I just make a kind of this shape. Now I need something to attach it to. So let's just draw a quick poly square. Okay, I'm making it slightly smaller so it bunches up a little bit. And to get the real sort of detail in a piece this small, I'm going to go down to 15. I'm going to freeze this curtain here so we don't simulate that as well. And where did this piece go? All the way up there. There we go. So let's just bring this piece down. F to focus in on the piece you currently have selected, same as in Maya really. And let's just grab this like so. Alright, and because I want it to actually drape on this slightly, I'm going to move this a bit far back like so. And make sure that we're in the right spot on the viewport. As I say, this is definitely not my favourite viewport to work with. Okay, now I'm going to stitch this to this. Right, there we go. And this is at 15. Let's make sure this is at 15 too. And I'm going to freeze this. And then to make sure this swings out nicely, we'll just rotate it upwards a bit and move it forward. That way it should swing down into the curtain. And it's perhaps still a little big, but we can see that after we've done this quick simulation. Yeah, I think this is kind of way too big for me. Okay, so let's just shrink it up a bit. So we can select both of these at the same time and use the transform to shrink them both. A little bit in, a little bit in, and a little bit up. So that's more the size I'm looking for. And then I'll just reset the pattern. Whoops. Make sure it's in the right place now with its smaller size. Okay, and I'll just sim that out, and that should be about perfect. There we go. So I'll just pause while that just drapes down a bit. Okay, and I also just drag the cotton material onto it. And pretty much that's about fine for me right now. Okay, so now we need to get this little lot back into Maya, which is pretty simple. What I'm going to do is name these patterns first. So let's shift click and select them all. And then up here I can name this drape front. And these two I will name drape back. It's just easier when I come to export them. So I'm going to save the garment. Okay, and then I'm going to export to Maya. So OBJ, and I'll call this drapes 1. Alright, so we know we want centimeters, and now because these are drapes front, I know I don't need this, I don't need this, and I don't need this. I don't need this. Basically, I just need the 2 back drapes and the 3 front drapes, which is 1, 2, 3. What I do need though is this center piece. So as I forgot to name that, excuse me folks, I'm going to have to go in and name this. I'll just call it center, and let's export again. So I'll call this back drapes Marvelous Designer. So now don't need the avatar, and don't need this pattern, don't need this one, and don't need this one. Okay, I'm going to punt it out as multiple objects, so if I wanted to I could texture all these curtains individually, and everything else looks fine, so let's just hit OK. Alright, now I need to import into Maya. So we come back to Maya here, import, and let's have a look. I need to be in the data directory, and back drapes Marvelous Designer. Alright, so there they are. Obviously they're slightly out of position, but that's okay. And I've also imported this, which I do not need. And let's just push these back. Let's center the pivot on that lot. And let's just push these back into the window frame. Okay, so let's take these separately, and then you're just going to have to do some organizing to get those into shape. But that's looking pretty darn good, really. Okay, let's put a standard material on this lot just so we can see it without that material from Marvelous Designer, and there we go. Now obviously we've got a bit of bisection with the wall here, so you know, in order to fix that up I probably just scale these in a tad. Whoops. There we go. Kind of perfect really, and there's some very complicated drapery, or would have been very complicated had we attempted it with something like end cloth, in the back of the window there. Let's bring the bed back in so we can get a quick look at it. And there you go. So all that cloth together for the final render is going to start to look very nice. Okay, so I will see you in the next part when we will do some covers for these couches. Now in that part we're actually going to do some animation in Maya, some really simple keyframe animation of this cushion going up and down, and then I'll show you how to export that animation data to Marvelous Designer so we can actually use animated objects to move our cloth around. So I hope you stay with me for that one, and I hope you found something interesting in this part. Thank you very much for watching.